folks here, it looks like.
Yes, I only knew that 2 that were missing, so I think we're good.
Brent,
All
give
right.
me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. This is an electronic meeting in accordance with Tennessee Governor Lee's Executive Order number 51, extending safe, open, and transparent public meetings by electronic means, while determinations for how to return to safe in-person meetings remain ongoing. If you have any conflicts of interest or made aware of any during the meeting, please make that known. Lindsay, will you please call the roll?
Hank Carr.
Here.
Shannon Castillo.
Here.
Tracy Johnson. Jody Jones.
Here.
Brent Long.
Here.
Freddie Malone.
Here.
Aaron Murphy.
Here.
Lindsay Nichols.
Here.
William Roller.
Here.
Seth Thomas.
Here.
Craig Torbett. Robert Williams.
Here.
And Joe Wise.
Here.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Move on to approval of February and March called board meeting minutes. Should have had the opportunity to review those. Does anyone have any corrections to either of the meeting minutes?
March 8th, item number 3, Ed Brading's name is just spelled wrong, Brading. It's
Thank you.
5 lines up from the bottom. Minor.
All right, hearing no other corrections, do we have a motion to approve both the February and March called minutes?
So moved. This is Jody.
Thank you, Jody. Second. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion for approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Freddie. Lindsay, will you please do a roll call to approve?
Hank Carr.
Yes.
Shannon Castillo.
Yeah.
Jody Jones.
Yes.
Brent Long.
Yes.
Freddie Malone.
Yes.
Aaron Murphy.
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols.
Yeah.
William Roller.
Yes.
Seth Thomas.
Yes.
Robert Williams.
Yes.
And Joe Wise.
Yes.
Thank you, Lindsay. Moving on. Approval of February financials. Jim, will you please present the financials?
Yes, I will. Thanks, Brent. We are 8 months into our fiscal year, which represents 2/3 of the total fiscal year budget. And I'll comment on the 2 separate reporting segments as we have been doing since earlier this year, the JCDA and the John Sevier operations. For the JCDA, taking a look at the balance sheet on the first page, you can see that up on the screen here. Let's see, would you scroll down just slightly, Diana? Is this the, okay, that's correct. The total current assets are $2,500,516 with $2,042,113 in cash. Of the cash, $1,366,245 is in the TIF account. $280,424 is in the operating account. And $193,696 is in the savings account, and $201,747 in the downtown center TIF fund. The total fund balance for the JCDA is $2,500,516, of which $1,576,316 is restricted for TIF projects, and $924,199 is unrestricted. Moving on to the statement of revenues and expenditures. Year-to-date total revenue is $559,726, of which $166,375 is operating revenue and $393,351 is TIF revenue. Year-to-date expenses are at $592,650. The year-to-date net result is a deficit of $32,924. When comparing the annual budget versus actual figures for the JCDA, 45% of budgeted revenues have been received and 56% of budgeted expenses have been incurred. Any questions about the JCDA financials? If not, we'll move on to John Sevier. For the John Sevier Center, the cash position is currently $203,101. There is $102,178 in the reserve account, $68,813 in the rental account, and $32,111 in the security deposit account. There are also $8,532 in receivables. There is $10,277 in accounts payable and $843,269 in other current liabilities related to loans outstanding. There's also long-term debt of $3,678,134. Looking at the statement of revenues and expenditures, total revenue was $675,091. Year-to-date operating expenses are at $617,742. The year-to-date net result is operating income before debt costs of $57,349. For the John Sevier, 66% of budgeted revenues have been received, compared with 84% of budgeted expenses. This is excluding depreciation, taxes, and interest, which are not part of the normal budget. And I will just comment that the reason for the difference between revenues and expenses primarily is due to the fact that the property taxes hit in the first half of the year. Are there any questions?
Hey, Jim, just a question. Was that March or February financials? Or
Yes, these are
January?
February.
Okay.
And Jim,
Yeah.
are we escrowing our property taxes?
No, we've just been paying them when they're due,
Okay.
but they are budgeted for, obviously.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Does anyone have any questions? Further questions before we move to a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Robert. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Lindsay, will you call the roll, please?
Hank Carr,
Yes.
Shannon Castillo,
Yes.
Jody Jones,
Yes.
Brent Long,
Yes.
Freddie Malone,
Yes.
Aaron Murphy,
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols,
Yeah.
William Roller,
Yes.
Seth Thomas,
Yes.
Robert Williams,
Yes.
and Joe Wise.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. We'll move on to an update from the John Sevier Task Force. Diana, can you please give us an update on the John Sevier Center, please?
Yes. So for operations, we do have a signed management agreement with LHP. It is for 7% management fee with no bookkeeping charges. The key staff that are remaining will get a slight pay increase, and they're working on the transfer of documents and books with M&M. Excuse me. We do need to set a line item in our budget for REAC and repairs. just a reminder, in order to get the rent increase, and the goal to get a passing REACT score, they have estimated about $128,000 to $185,000 for the REACT inspection. So now that we have that amount, we will go back and we'll look at our budget to see and actually have them sit down with Dave to see what can be done by the in-house maintenance staff. But we will need to set aside some funding in our budget for REACT repairs moving forward for the next 3 months. Any questions on operations? On the disposition side, we had a meeting with Pete Peterson 2 weeks ago to discuss a option to help that the city could work with, that was identified by LHP to reduce that funding gap. So he was going to do some research into a program called Section 108 that's through HUD. LHP is also continuing to seek other funding options to reduce that gap. And then we're also going to have somebody look at the estimates that LHP has given us to see if we think that there might be some something that maybe is a little high, just to go over it with someone that does construction for apartment housing. So that's where we are with LHP, still working daily with them.
Thank you for that update, Diana. Move on to the next item on the agenda, the TIF Advisory Board request. The TIF Advisory Board met yesterday and is coming today to recommend approval of a facade grant in the amount of $7,327 for 118 West Market Street. That's the Campbell's Music Building. Diana, will you please go over the scope of the project?
Certainly. So there are two projects that are being completed on that building. The first was to do some brick restoration along the front, and that had to be done earlier this winter, just because there was an emergency need. That is part of the facade. If a building owner, it's approved if a building owner needs to do something as an emergency repair on their building. So he had some brick restored on the front. A lot of it was water damage. If you think back, that building has had major flooding issues when we had flooding downtown. And then the second part of the facade grant request is to replace the 15 windows on the back of the building, which I'll remind you also overlook King Commons. And so so those windows are wood, they're rotting. They actually have some ironwork bars on the back, and he's going to have those removed as well. So the request, the total cost of the work is $14,655, and half of that is eligible for a facade grant, $7,327.
I guess if we're going to get technical about it, there should be another 50 cents added onto that if we're going to be truly 50%. All right. The sign looks great, by the way, over there. Great improvement. Yeah. Since this is coming as a recommendation from TIF, do we have a motion for a second?
I will gladly motion for second.
I'll second.
All right. Looks like we got a couple of seconds. Lindsay, will you please do a roll call?
Hank Carr,
Yes.
Shannon Castillo,
Yes.
Jody Jones,
Yes.
Brent Long,
Yes.
Freddie Malone,
Yes.
Aaron Murphy,
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols,
Yes.
William Roller,
Yes.
Seth Thomas,
Yes.
Robert Williams,
Yes.
and Joe Wise.
Yes.
All right. Also, the TIF Advisory Board heard from a West Walnut Street property owner yesterday who's going to be doing some major renovations on the old Preston woodworking building, but he's still waiting on architectural drawings, and he's going to come back with a more detailed pro forma of the project next month. So just an update there. Moving on to the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Diana, can you please go over the proposed budget?
Yes. So I gave a agenda in your agenda review. I gave a few highlights of the changes that we put in there. I'm going to go to the expense detail first. Just to remind you, if you're looking back from this year's budget, if you're comparing that, BCS recommended that Jim become a part-time employee versus a contract employee based on the scope of his work. So we have added in his salary into the employee payroll. We've also put in a 6.5% increase across the board in salaries. There's also an addition of $11,000 for a part-time 10-hour-a-week administrative support position for the JCDA. Just a reminder, as a public entity, there's a lot of paperwork and reporting that we need to do, and having that administrative support would be it's very much needed in this office. Moving on down to another line item, our benefits doesn't change much. Payroll taxes, all that pretty much stays the same. Administrative and operations, we've stayed pretty much the same. Professional services, some line items have gone up, including our accounting fees. Just our BCS fees have increased. We did reduce our outside contract services was Jim's salary. We've taken that and moved it up. However, we do have parking garage, access contract that we have, and I have $500 a semester allocated for interns. So that's $5,700. We go down to downtown development. What we've done here is we have taken out the funding that we had for downtown development. I will remind you, last year we pretty much slashed that budget. But what we're doing is adding support to Connect Downtown JC. That's the former foundation. They have created a budget, and this is a third of their programming budget, $21,800. And I did leave $2,000 in there for some new business recruitment funds, since business recruitment is a priority of the JCDA. Our insurance costs haven't changed. If you go down to downtown events and programming, I'll remind you that the city has allocated $15,000 for the last 4 or 5 years to the JCDA to give out to the downtown festivals. When they started that, we had 2 festivals. We now have 4 festivals. And so looking forward for next year, I would like to request $20,000 from the city for festival allocations. And that way we could do across the board $5,000 support for all 4 festivals. The $3,000 that's in here was allocated by the JCDA for events such as Founders After 5, which is now in the Connect Downtown budget. Facility and office, the big increase here is the increase that Assistant Manager Bob Wilson recommended that I put in. There is discussion about the JCDA moving into office space with the Johnson City Convention and Visitors Bureau and some members of the city communications staff. That space would also have a visitor center. And so it would be located in downtown at a very visible location. And that also gives the ability for the Connect Downtown Johnson City Group to have some merchandise to be a revenue for them. So that's the big increase in that area. It's nothing has been finalized, but I went ahead and put it in the budget. And all of our TIF remains about the same. So if you go down to operating expenses, that's $2,903.993. And we go back up to our revenue. We get $12,000 a year for lease income. I have increased the operating request for revenue to the city to $196,000. There's our festival allocation of $20,000 request. Other income, I don't remember what other income was. I'll have to go back and look at that. Sorry, I should know that. Interest income, our interest has been drastically reduced a result of the pandemic. So that's less money than we had anticipated. Our TIF administrative fee, just to remind you, that goes towards any administration work of the TIF, including staff salaries and operational expenses. That is 5% of the city's allocation. So that's $26,500. And then I recommended 10% draw from our general fund of $30,000. Any questions?
This is Jody. Diana, when does this go in front of the city?
I need to submit it actually like today.
Today?
They requested it. Yeah, they requested it last week. And so I told them that I needed to submit it to the board before, but they are already requesting. They've asked us to request funds. And I'll remind you, they also, as part of the strategic planning process, asked us to identify ways that we can be a part of that, the sections of strategic planning, and to add that to our budget.
That was exactly what I was going to ask. And do you have an opportunity to present it, or is it just a written document that they look at?
I submit it in written form, and then if there are any questions, they will get back to me. Or I've never been asked to present a budget, I don't believe.
Okay, well, I was just thinking that it would be, if I were, and Commissioner Wise may have thoughts on this too, but if I were them, I would love to see like just a short executive summary or a one pager, and maybe this could follow, by a few days, your submission of the budget, since it's due so soon, but just highlighting the things that do correspond to their strategic plan and connect our strategic plan, right? So just showing the effort we've made to connect the two, and then here's how we're funding those strategic actions.
Yes, ma'am. I've already started that and pretty much have it complete. So I'll have that, as well as we have a spreadsheet that shows the historical funding for the JCDA from the city.
So we're not being asked to approve this budget today. You're just telling us this is what you're going to submit to the city? Is that how I understand it?
No, I would think that it would be that you all would approve this proposed budget to submit to the city. If we have to amend it at some point, we certainly can. But I think it would show that the board supports this budget if you approve it to be submitted.
So I need to back up for just a minute. Jim, the $180,000 number that we need to find to make these repairs at the John Sevier, are there adequate reserves in the John Sevier fund to cover that without getting into the general fund?
Thanks for asking that, Hank. I've done a simulation of what the John Sevier cash flow budget looks like for next year. And if we get the proposed rent increases that LHP is working on, we'll have enough from cash flow next year to fund the REAC repairs. If there's a delay in that, then we do have enough resources, I think, to fund these repairs. But we'd have to draw into the reserve funds somewhat. But I'm hopeful that if we do get the rent increases, it looks like cash flow will be okay to fund the full REAC repair.
I think the other part, I was speaking to the city manager about that deficiency and that kind of idea that he was investigating about Diana, you'd have to remind me of the program name, but one of the real questions he has is, what's the long-term prognosis for this John Sevier takeout at the end, and just what's that deficiency going to be? And where he was really going with it is, how much debt can we pay down in the next 3 years to begin to minimize that potential deficiency? And so I don't think we have the answer to that, but I know that he is genuinely concerned. You've got a deficiency in the development budget. We predict a deficiency when we try to transition that property off to an investor against the loan. There's not, there likely won't be enough money to pay off the loan. And the question is, how much of the loan can we pay down? And so I just tying all that together for everybody to say, getting into our reserve account is risky. I'll just say it that way. I said this last year, and I believe it again. We still owe a lot of money to a lot of people, but I'll let the group have a conversation about that. It concerns me a lot.
I know one of the things that we discussed on our phone call, Diana and I did, when we spoke with Mr. Peterson, was that, when it comes time for the disposition of the John Sevier Center, that's going to coincide with the renewal or not of Northeast State over at the downtown center. And currently they're at a very, very low rate from a rental standpoint. And, we anticipate that is going to go up. And we're going to have, at that point in time, Dana, can you remind me what our balance is going to be, or Jim, what our balance is going to be on the downtown center? Because one of the thoughts that we had was that whatever that deficit is, we could move that over to the downtown center because our balance
we have
speaks of it.
1,170,000 outstanding on the downtown center loan right now.
If we were to fast forward a few years on that amortization schedule, roughly where would we be, Jim?
I'll have to get back to you on that because I don't have that amortization schedule in front of me. I would suspect, though, we won't be paying off more than 100,000 or so a year in principal.
Yeah. So we're probably going to be below that $1 million mark on something that is worth quite a bit more. So that does provide us some option there, Hank.
Yeah, but Jim, that's a TIF line. The building itself is unencumbered. So if
Right.
and when we do have a market rate lease on the downtown center, it's roughly 40,000 square feet. Obviously, we would want to either condo out or keep control of the parking garage. Hopefully, if we had a market rate rent, we could service the debt of the remaining John Sevier loan. Yes, I think at least one option we can look at. And I agree with you, Hank. There's, you know, there's some headwinds that we're facing with the John Sevier project. You know, it's a very complex transaction. The HAP transfer, not only from party A to party B, but also the relocation is probably the rarest of all of the HUD HAP transactions. And then our low subsidized rents in East Tennessee makes the project difficult as far as another headwind. LHP is working on trying to maximize those rents, but once the transfer takes place, you can't actually increase the rents for, I think it's 5 years. There's a period of time. One way that they can address that is that you reduce the number of units from 150 to 145, but you keep the same lease income. But you know, this HUD section 108 potential loan, it would have to be with, you know, partnering with the city is a potential option to meet that that funding gap. And the JCDA could potentially get some sort of additional principal curtailment, some pay down from that that would allow us to pay that loan down. I agree with you, Hank. Instead of pulling from our reserves, I don't know if we need to have a discussion with the city if they would be willing to help us fund some of these necessary renovations or not.
Well, and I got another question. Jim, just remind me really quickly, what do we have in total unrestricted reserves that we could tap into right now?
I have that. Based
Okay.
on what are the 4 months that remain, we will end the fiscal year with about $432,089.
And is any of this revenue being recognized or is there any money being paid from the John Sevier Fund towards yours and Jim's salary expenses?
Not currently.
See, that's something that I think needs to happen, and that creates some relief here. It creates some problems on the John Sevier side, but you guys are spending an enormous amount of time managing the John Sevier. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I'm spending less and less time by design and because you guys are getting a grip on it, and there needs to be some recognition out of the John Sevier revenue stream back towards your all salaries and expenses. But Jim, that creates another problem, as you outlined, which is back to cash flow and funding those repairs. So I don't know how you want to accomplish that. At the end of the day, it's a pot of money. I'm not keen on getting into our reserves, but I'll defer to the group on that one. I do think you need to pull some money out of John Sevier towards salaries for next year and expenses.
I agree, Hank. The concern right now is what it's going to cost us to do those REAC inspections. And I think if we get those inspections, the repairs paid for, and they are able to get the rent increase that we need, there's definitely going to be some ability to pay, to allocate salaries.
I agree, but we need to run it like a business, and we need to recognize the cost that's coming out of it and the revenue that's coming into it. I mean, there's no question you're gonna have to make the repairs, but anyway.
As you mentioned, Diana, having a contractor kind of look back at those costs of the REAC repairs. What's the process if we come back and see that there's a gross difference in pricing that they've proposed and what we find, you know, through someone giving it a second look? Do they have do they have to honor what the market price is, or is it one of those things where they just kind of set the price that's based on their research? And
This is all time and materials work. This is not a budgeted or a bid amount. It's, you get in there and you start making the repairs and they think it's gonna cost 100 and whatever that number was, $175,000. It could cost 150 and it could cost 250. You just don't know until you get into it, given the age of the building. The goal here, and it's what everybody needs to remember, you got to get a passing REACT score of 70 or above to be able to move forward with the plan to transfer the HAP contracts, okay? It isn't one or the other. It's, you have to have one to get the other. Our plan is dead in the water, for lack of a better word, if we don't get our REACT score up.
And I think William was asking about the future, the budget that they've presented us on the new development. And I just believe that we would be more well-informed on construction costs if we have somebody looking at it to say, you know, yeah, I've just built, this is what I'm budgeting would look at to build a 150 unit property.
We're talking about, yeah, two different things though.
Yeah.
Let's just stay focused on the budget. We're asking for a $60,000 increase from last year to this year, correct?
Correct.
30,000 of that's coming out of reserves and roughly 30 is coming from the city.
Correct.
That's what everybody's been asked to vote on.
And I'm going to make a comment from the HR committee. Actually, this is going to come as a recommendation. During our February board meeting, HR committee gave a report on salary comparisons of executive directors, national average, state average. And the conclusion of that was that there was a $18,000 to $19,000 delta in what our executive director is making and what the averages are. As part of this, the HR committee would like to make a recommendation that we fund half of that gap. So a total of $9,000, which we're not currently showing in this budget that Dinah has put together, but the HR committee would like to make that recommendation.
So that changes the budget that Diana just presented, right?
That's correct. Currently, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're showing a 6.2% increase for the executive director. So that would, it's certainly not the $9,000 that would get us halfway, with the idea that in next year, in the 22-23 budget, that we would add the additional $9,000 to bring this position up to what it should be paying.
Did the budget committee review and approve? I think there's a budget committee, this budget, or was this staff generated?
This is staff generated. There is not a budget committee. We used to use the executive committee for that. And we don't have an executive committee anymore. So it all comes from the board.
I don't know why, but I thought last year there was a group of folks that put all this together and vetted it out, but.
That was the executive committee.
Okay.
Kind of a related question. We kind of meshed together, or a conversation went to kind of the JCDA's normal operating budget and then John Sevier. I'm assuming there'll be a separate budget for the John Sevier for us to review. Does the city need it as well?
No, the city doesn't review that. And we are working with LHP to work on that budget. So the difference in the proposed budget and an addition of additional funds from HR committee would be $5,100.
So I guess at this point, we would be looking for a motion to approve this budget, either with or without the additional 5,100 for the executive director position.
So that increase in that line item would come from, it would be funded from the general fund? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
It's
I
either
would
that-
recommend, go ahead, Brent.
It's either that or we request additional funds from the city, correct, Diana?
I would recommend you look at doing, keeping it at a 10% draw from your general fund and then any additional requests coming to the city.
And what is the case to be made for more money from the city? You know, again, I'm going to Jody Jones' comment earlier, connecting it to the strategic plan, connecting it to the priority to collaborate between quasi-public entities, you know, to achieve better impact for the investment. There needs to be more to it than just, we'd like more money.
Yes, sir. That's what I put in your agenda review. If you'll recall, the categories under economic vitality and quality of life that the JCDA has a direct connection to, and we will do an overview of how the JCDA programming falls into those strategic planning. Well,
I guess that's not
I
really
don't
the
believe
question I'm asking. I mean, I think
Okay.
Of course, the JCDA fits into the strategic plan and its broad, highest ideal purpose. But I think the question needs to be, if you get another $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 from the city, at the end of receiving those dollars, what can the city point to as, but for those dollars, this would not be true?
So,
And I'm asking that more to refine this process. I'm not looking for an answer, but there needs to be an answer. It can't just be
right.
come to the city and ask for more money so we can pay Diana $9,000 or $18,000 more a year. I mean, I'd love for everybody to make $18,000 more a year.
This is Jody.
There is a-
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment that the contribution from the city that we're comparing to in 2020-21 was cut way back due to COVID.
Well,
and
no,
maybe
I
other
think
reasons
the reason
too.
the reason the contribution from the city was reduced was the city was funding a marketing position at the JCDA that we elected to move internal and now works in the department at City Hall. So it was not, it's not entirely accurate to say the budget was cut. A position was moved out of JCDA and exists at City Hall.
So did that save us any money from a JCDA perspective?
No, sir. That's when we made budget cuts on programming so that we could keep the marketing manager position. The JCDA felt like that position was important to maintain.
This is Jody. I just want to kind of pull together a few things that Commissioner Wise and myself and maybe Hank have sort of bits and pieces throughout this thread. And I think that is that we're sort of in this moment realizing we need maybe a different process annually for really, it's like we're at the step one of having pulled together sort of this set of things that we know are consistent with our strategic plan and we know are important in various ways for different sort of line items, but we didn't really have like an intermediary process of really looking at all of those items together and sorting them out and thinking about a cohesive rationale, tying it with the city's strategic plan and really making a case for some of the changes in terms of, impact too, as Commissioner Wise was saying. So just a note, we need to think about that for next year. But also we're here today and there's a time sensitive need for us to move forward. So is there some sort of patch we can put on this and get something to the city that helps us move forward in a time sensitive way, but also kind of communicates that we're working on it?
Jody, I appreciate it. So I mean, from a high level, I think the John Sevier ought to be contributing $25,000 or so a year towards those salaries at a minimum. That's just my thought. I felt that way a year ago, and so that really hasn't changed. I doubt that covers the amount of time that's being invested in it, but I don't know how that affects the budget of the John Sevier, because I just haven't looked at it, but that's in my opinion needs to happen. I mean, from a discussion perspective, I support the salary adjustment to the executive director's line item. I think we have to pay what is market. That part I think is I mean, that's what I've asked everybody to do. Go do a salary survey. Tell me what it should be. Then now you have a separate discussion about, the job and everything that goes with it. That's totally separate, but I do support, I think I can get behind the recommendation. The funding part of this is the part that gives me pause, but probably more than anything, it's an expense issue when it comes right down to it. If the city withdrew whatever the number was, $30,000 or $40,000 last year, I don't know what that number was, but to move that marketing position in-house, and we choose to keep the marketing position for good reason, then we have to figure out how to fund it. But guys, I tell you what, I do not support taking money out of the reserve fund. I don't. That's just me. We owe a lot of people a lot of money, and I don't know how you move. I don't know how you move this forward, but that's where I come down on it.
So Hank, what would you think about, we can change the line 1035 instead of drawing from general fund? It could be that we can word it however, that it would be staffing support from John Sevier Center. And, so if we took 25,000 from John Sevier, if we see that would work in our budget, and then maybe 5,000 from the revenue stream or the general fund.
Well, it's a lot better than taking money out of the general fund. I don't support it at all. I'd rather cut $5,000 somewhere else. But $5,000 is not going to change your life. 30, you start dipping into 8 or 10% of your general fund every year, it's going to be gone before you know it.
Yeah. And I will say this budget is, when it comes to administrative costs, I've nickeled and dimed us, and have for the last 2 years. There is a little bit of a contingency line item here, just because you never know what's going. No, I took the contingency out as well. Our administrative costs are what they are. When it comes to IT support and different options that we have there, there's not a lot of flexibility there.
Do we have to provide, do we have to provide the festival allocation? Is that coming from the city?
That comes from the city. Comes from the city. It's a separate line item on the revenue stream, if you'll look.
Can we get our TIP administrative fee back up to 35?
No, sir. The county wouldn't allow, the county mayor did not think that the county commission would approve that use of TIF funds. And Craig and I argued very hard for that, and even brought a budget.
Well, we're not, the 30,000 or the $25,000 that you pull out of John Sevier, it creates another problem on the other side that Jim's gonna have to go solve, or we will have to ultimately solve. But we're still a long ways off from where we need to be. Anybody got any suggestions? Besides going to,
I think I do agree with you. I tend to think that, the amount of time that Diana and Jim are spending on the John Sevier, there should be a line item there that goes towards their salaries.
oh, there's no question about that. It's just, but again, even if you do that, guys, we're still, we were 70,000 out of range from last year for this year to the future year. And we just covered 25 of it. So we're still 45 out of range.
So there have been times that the city in 2010 to 2014, they supported the JCDA in the amount of, I'm sorry, I got to get my $184,000. And then in 2019, it was up to 170,000. I think we can show that, we all know that position was definitely needed. And even with not coordinating the events for Founders Park and King Commons, that marketing position has is a value. And I think we I don't know. I think that we show the city the value of the JCDA, what we're doing for development, remind them of we don't get sales tax revenue in for the district. We don't have those records, but I would think that that our sales tax has risen immensely in the district over the last 8 years, and a slight increase in our budget allocation compared to other quasi-government agencies would be justified.
And I'm looking at this line item of $21,800 that's going to go to support to connect downtown JC. That's not an insignificant amount of money, and that organization is going to do some fantastic things. But in the beginning, they need some help from JCDA. So I think that's certainly something to bring up to the city as well. We're putting the seed money into this.
Right. And that is just a third of their budget. They have committed to raising the additional revenue for that, for their budget.
So if you throw that in with the additional cost in rent, we're going from $6,000 to $13,800 at the recommendation. Diana, you said the assistant city manager.
Correct.
We have a recommendation to go spend $7,800 more in rent than we're currently spending.
And I think what I would say from a commission perspective, that you can tie to the strategy, and you can tie to but for this wouldn't have happened. And so, increasing the visibility of a visitor center, potentially having an opportunity to retail city branded kinds of merchandise, is the beginnings of the case I'm talking about. But I think we can, right now it's so slushy the way, even this conversation, we've got 60,000, then we haven't taken into account the director salary questions. And so, we just need to move beyond just, well, here we need a plug number. We're out of balance on our budget. We're looking for X dollars. We need to build the case element by element and get to a number that makes public sense. I mean, I see the value in a marketing position. I think people like the mall see the value in a marketing position. That's why they pay for one. And so we have to make the case for using taxpayer dollars to fund a position that in other settings, the beneficiaries, the direct beneficiaries of those positions pay for.
That makes a lot of sense, Joe. I appreciate that. I think my recommendation would be, you know, when we're going to the city then would be to say, first of all, I would take, I guess, you know, we're increasing the amount of $60,000, 143 is what I'm showing.
Plus your 13.
13.
For the salary adjustment.
Well, that's already included except for 5,100. So really, I guess we're about 65,000, little over $65,000 increase. So if we took those two line items, which were support to connect downtown JC of 21,800, then the additional 7,800 in rent, you know, that's nearly $30,000 of that 65. And then, you know, we just swallow the pill on the other 35 of pulling that from John Sevier to pay for the remainder of the salaries. I don't think $35,000 is unreasonable for the amount of work that Jim and Diana are putting into the John Sevier Center. So in that case, you don't pull from the general fund. You take $35,000 roughly to go towards salaries. And then the other $30,000 you ask for from the city, roughly $30,000. That's 21,800 plus 7,800, whatever that is. And that is your, you know, but for this money coming in, we would not have the funds to support Connect Downtown JC. We do not have the funds to move offices and increase our rent. That's my recommendation.
Well, look, at the end of the day, whether you pull it out of the general fund now or the John Sevier now, you wonder whether you can change that decision next week, next month. You can change where those monies are pulled from. I don't like the fact that we got a gun to our head having to solve this without really being able to think it through and scrutinize this. But the fact remains is it's sitting in front of us to decide. Jim, I'd have to see what the John Sevier operating NOI looks like, you know, before you decide what all that is, because that's not been put in front of us today. But clearly there needs to be some money allocated. So, and folks, we're out of time. I've got to go to another meeting. And so I'll ask somebody to call the question.
Do we have a motion to approve this budget with the amendment of adding the additional $5,100 for the executive director's salary? And then, as Hank said, we can sort out if we want to pull that additional money from the general fund, or if we want to do it from the John Sevier.
I don't think you're going to get a motion today.
I was going to say, I personally don't feel comfortable voting on this because it's not gone through the process. and it's at the last minute. And the truth is, the city's call for budgets from departments and quasi isn't something that happened in the last 2 weeks. We're dealing with this now because we chose to deal with it now.
So I did receive the request for the budget about 2 weeks ago from Dustin from the city. We definitely did not have it for last month's meeting, and I'll would also, I mean, it's not a surprise that I needed to work on the budget, but we've been so overwhelmed with HUD and the negotiations with LHP, we weren't able to get. We typically do this in March, prior JCDA meetings, and we can send over, if you want to send over a preliminary request to the city, and we have an additional meeting. But years prior, this is when we have addressed the budget and the budget request to the city.
All right, with that being said and no motion, guess we will pause on this, and if we need to have a called meeting in between now and our next meeting to approve it.
Hey, Brent, if I may, there's not a reason that Jim and Diana can't send this to the city, and it's just sent to the city as a starting point, a beginning, with the acknowledgement that it's not yet been approved by the JCDA board. Am I wrong there?
I believe we could do that.
And if we
Yeah.
do have a called meeting to discuss this again, I would love for just a short list of focused items that we need to be talking about, and then a strategy for, really looking at Commissioner Wise's point, like if not for funding this budget, these kinds of outcomes could not happen.
And I'll remind
Thank
you, this increase, if you had looked at years prior, we were at $175,000 allocation. So it's really a $20,000 increase over prior years, and we definitely can show what the staff and and how the JCDA plays into the strategic plan. I mean, it's very, we can definitely make that correlation.
But I would caution you, in the city's mind, we have not cut the funding the way you experienced that cut, because we kept the position previous commissions prioritized in that original allocation. We just moved it out of JCDA.
That's
so
correct.
That in and of itself, right? No, I know. But what I'm saying is that in and of itself is not a compelling argument when you're looking at it from the city side, because we would say, well, yeah, but we just moved it over here. Have you met Andy?
I would say that position's job description changed over a 2-year period.
Agreed. But what we used to do and what you'd like us to do shouldn't be based on precedent like that, simply because in our minds, the priority that led us to funding that position is still being met. It may not be meeting everything you were doing with that position, but then that's where you need to make the case for if not this, then that would not have happened. And I'm not arguing with you. I just want, that seems to be the way the argument goes back to what we used to do and how this isn't that much different than what we used to do. And I just, that's not where this needs to go.
Yeah, and perhaps a list of priorities on this budget, so that the city can see if this doesn't get funded, then these items are not going to make the budget.
Yeah, I think that would be a helpful starting place.
I like that too.
Well, if I may, one other point of clarification, and I think Hank has dropped off, but as I recall, Hank, the way he worded it, he said, is there any way or can we get that administrative fee back to 35? And just a point of clarification, we budgeted 35 last year, but we're not going to get 35 for last year. So we never had that. I think that was a hope, a desire, a wish, but that 35,000 that was budgeted was, we had never had it in the past, and it was optimistic to think, I think that we could get it. Now we're going to get more on that line item than we've ever gotten in the past, but that's not something we had and lost. That's something we never had and we're hoping for.
That's correct. And, and we also didn't have the parking garage being open allocation in this past year's budget, and we added it in. So I can definitely tie parking solutions and the work that we're doing through the Downtown Now program on marketing the district and increasing the trying to recruit new businesses to the city's plan.
And I think the synergy between a visitor center, CVB, and Johnson City JCDA are compelling. I think the parking solutions are compelling, but that argument is going to need to be distilled down, and it needs to be laser focused in a way this conversation this morning hasn't been.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your comments on that. We're going to move on. There's nothing from the chair report. Do we have anything from the staff?
In the interest of time, I'll just recommend that you look at our staff reports. They're very complete, and let you know some things that have been occurring this year, this month. And I will say that there are 5 commissioners' positions open for reappointment. You'll be receiving a letter from the city. We have realized, based on the way that we rolled board members off last year, that we have 5 this year and 5 next year, because 3 of the positions are held by county or city commissioners. So I'm going to recommend to the city that of those 5, 2 will be 1 term, 1 year or 2-year terms, and then some will be 3-year terms to get us on a better rotation schedule.
So who's up? Do you know who's up in 21?
I read that email.
Could you email that to us?
I'll be glad
if you need to. Okay,
yeah.
Just to figure out who needs to be thinking about their reappointment.
Yes, I always let the commissioners know that they are up for reappointment. But so I will
Just let us all see it, so we're all on the same page. Just send it to everybody so we're all on the same page.
Certainly. But like I said, we need to change some of the term years so that so we can get back on a better rotation. That's all I have.
All right. Not having any more business, we will adjourn the board meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.